man lies in the desert, bleeding in the dust. No medics in sight. No promise of rescue. What becomes of soldiers too wounded to walk away? The battle is over. The shouting, the smoke, the chaos, it's all faded into a low hum of wind and silence. You can almost hear the sand shifting over the bodies. The desert looks calm again, but it's a lie, because somewhere between the dunes, men are still breathing. Barely. Their uniforms are torn, their mouths dry, and their minds stuck in that timeless space between survival and surrender. These are the ones history barely talks about. The wounded, the forgotten, the ones who didn't die gloriously or march home victorious. They just lingered. Egyptian soldiers have seen wars come and go for thousands of years. From the days of pharaohs to the roar of modern tanks, the same truth repeats itself. When the fighting ends, not everyone gets to stand back up. So what really happened to those wounded Egyptians left behind after battle? The ones who survived the arrows, the bullets, the explosions, but not the silence that followed. To answer that, you have to go way back, long before guns and politics, back to when Egyptian armies marched under the desert sun with chariots and spears. Even then, they had medics, real ones. The Egyptians were among the first people in history to actually study wounds, not just pray over them. They cleaned them with honey, wrapped them in linen, even stitched torn flesh together. They weren't guessing. They knew infection killed faster than any sword. Their scrolls described exactly how to stop bleeding, how to close a wound, and how to tell when a man was beyond saving. Imagine that. 3,000 years ago, in the middle of some dusty campaign, a soldier gets hit with an arrow. His comrades drag him behind the lines. A healer kneels beside him, tears open the linen, pours honey into the wound, and wraps it tight. No anesthesia, no morphine, just faith and grit. If the wound stayed clean, he might live. If not, infection took him by morning. In those days, mercy and medicine looked almost the same. But for most, it wasn't the injury that killed them. It was what came after: the heat, the distance, the lack of transport. You couldn't exactly call for a helicopter in 1200 BC. So many of the wounded just faded into the desert. The army moved on. The sand buried them. Centuries passed, and war kept returning like a tide. The weapons changed. The uniforms changed. But for wounded soldiers, the pattern stayed painfully familiar. In medieval battles, when Egyptian or Ottoman troops clashed with invaders, the wounded often lay for hours before anyone reached them. Some were picked up by locals, some were looted, some were simply left to die because carrying them slowed the march. Commanders had to make choices no human should ever have to make: save the men who can still fight, or die trying to save the ones who can't. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Egypt's battlefield stories become both clearer and crueler. We have photos, records, survivors, but that doesn't make them easier to hear. During the 1967 war, when Egypt faced Israel in the Sinai, the desert became a graveyard of wounded soldiers. It wasn't the quick, glorious kind of war governments like to remember. It was confusion, planes bombing convoys, tanks burning under the sun, entire battalions cut off from command, running, bleeding, breaking. Imagine lying there after your tank explodes, your leg gone, your radio silent. You hear gunfire fade into the distance, then nothing but the wind. Hours pass. The sun scorches your skin. You start thinking about water, your family, the stupid smell of diesel and sand. Then the realization hits you. You're not being rescued. No one's coming. Maybe your side retreated. Maybe they don't even know where you are. Some of the wounded were lucky. They crawled or were dragged back to Egyptian lines and treated in makeshift tents, where medics worked non-stop, patching holes in flesh and hope. Others were captured by enemy forces. For them, luck was a flexible word. A few received basic treatment. Others didn't survive the night. Some were executed on the spot, not because they posed a threat, but because war makes men do terrible things when they think no one's watching. There were reports of entire groups of wounded Egyptians buried alive in shallow sand pits after surrendering. Others were shot as they begged for water, and when the fighting finally stopped, the dead didn't get names, just coordinates. The missing lists grew. Families waited for decades without answers. Mothers kept photos of sons who were technically alive on paper, but gone in every other way. The government eventually declared thousands dead, but that word, dead, barely scratches what happened. Those who survived didn't exactly return to a hero's welcome either. They came home limping, burned, disfigured, sometimes blind. Hospitals overflowed. Amputees lined the wards. For every soldier killed in battle, 2 or 3 came back wounded. Some learned to walk again. Some never left their beds. Others walked out fine on the outside, but carried the war inside their skulls. Nightmares, survivors' guilt, flashbacks of men calling for help they couldn't give. You can fix a body sometimes, but the mind, not so easy. By the 1973 war, things had changed a little. Egypt had reorganized its military hospitals, learned lessons from the humiliation of '67. Field medics were better trained, supply chains were tighter. But still, battle doesn't care about your improvements. The crossing of the Suez Canal was heroic, but it was bloody. Thousands were hit in the first few days. Medics had to work under fire, with shells exploding near their tents. They ran out of morphine, used belts as tourniquets, and sent the most severe cases across the canal on stretchers made from wooden planks. Some made it, some didn't. Some died on the way home without ever making it into the records. The wounded were treated in mobile hospitals, converted schools, even mosques. Those who lived often said the silence in those wards was worse than the battlefield itself. The moaning, the smell of antiseptic, the constant sound of stretchers rolling. You can't unhear that. And then there were the ones who disappeared completely, the soldiers who fell in the dunes and were never found. Even today, parts of the Sinai are rumored to hide unmarked graves. Every now and then, a shepherd or construction crew stumbles upon bones, a rusted tag, a tattered boot. The desert doesn't forget, it just hides. For those who did make it back, life wasn't easy. Egypt in the '70s was rebuilding pride and infrastructure, but for many wounded veterans, the war never ended. Some couldn't work, others faced stigma. Society saw them as symbols of sacrifice, but not always as people with needs. You can imagine sitting in a small Cairo apartment, your uniform folded in a drawer, your medals collecting dust, while you fight phantom pain in a leg that's no longer there. You switch on the radio, hear politicians talk about victory and peace treaties, and you just laugh quietly because you know the truth. Wars don't end when the guns go silent. They end when the wounded stop waking up screaming. And some never do. But the story isn't all tragedy. There's resilience too. Many wounded Egyptian soldiers became part of the country's rebuilding efforts. Some joined the medical corps, determined to make sure the next generation of soldiers wouldn't be left to die like they almost were. They turned their pain into purpose, teaching young medics how to keep men alive in impossible conditions. Others helped form veterans organizations, pushing for pensions, healthcare, recognition. Their scars became their credentials. Still, the ghosts remained. Even today, if you walk through certain parts of Sinai or along the old Suez front, locals will tell you about strange metallic noises at night, like the echo of tanks moving underground. They say the wind still whispers through old helmets buried beneath the sand. Maybe it's myth, maybe it's memory. Either way, it's Egypt remembering her sons. It's easy to look at war and count winners and losers, but the wounded don't fit into either box. They're not martyrs, not victors. They're living reminders of the price every soldier pays, whether the world thanks them or not. They're the proof that survival isn't always mercy. Sometimes it's a sentence. Think about that moment right after a battle ends. The silence, the bodies, the medics running out of supplies. That's when humanity gets tested most. Do you risk your life to carry a wounded man? Do you choose one over another? History doesn't record those choices, but they happened thousands of times in every Egyptian war. Soldiers dragging their brothers under fire, improvising splints from rifle stocks, giving their last sip of water to someone bleeding out beside them. Those are the stories we never hear in victory speeches. Even in ancient times, when soldiers came home wounded, Egyptians treated them with an odd mix of reverence and fear. They were living reminders of chaos, a break in the order that Egypt prized so much. Some were honored, others quietly faded into the background, but one thing never changed. The wounded were witnesses. They saw the cost of empire up close, and maybe that's why they rarely spoke much about it. When you think about Egypt, you probably picture pyramids, pharaohs, and golden tombs. But there's another Egypt beneath all that glamour, a land soaked in the blood of people who fought and bled for it. And in that sand lie stories that were never written, because the men who could tell them never came back. Maybe somewhere out there, the bones of a young soldier still rest under the dunes, the metal of his dog tag worn smooth by time. Maybe his mother died, not knowing where he was buried. Maybe his name is still carved on a plaque in a small village school next to others who never returned. And maybe that's the real tragedy, not just that they died, but that the world moved on. So what happened to the wounded Egyptian soldiers after battle? Some lived, some didn't. Some came home heroes, Others came home haunted. Some never came home at all. They were healed, forgotten, executed, buried, honored, ignored, every outcome that war allows. But they all shared one truth. When the dust settled and the crowds cheered, they were the ones still fighting, in body, in mind, in silence. Wars are loud, peace is quieter, but for the wounded, it's never silent. Their stories echo through every generation that picks up a weapon and every country that sends its sons to the front. And if hearing this made you stop and think for even a second about what war really leaves behind, then take that thought with you. Share it, talk about it, because remembering them isn't just history, it's the least we can do for those who paid the price and lived to tell no tale.